Hello and welcome to the computer learning class by Accelerate Computer Systems. My name is Arun and I will be your trainer today. In one of our previous videos, we created subnetworks for a class C IP address. Today, we will learn how we can create subnetworks if we have a class B IPv4 address. The process is largely the same except for the fact that you can make networks that contain more than 256 hosts. Before we move further, let us look at a simple calculation that we use to be able to find out how many networks and hosts we can create from the given network block. Let's have a look at a class C IPv4 address with its default subnet mask, which is 255.255.255.0 right here. We know that an IP address contains the network address as well as the host address. A subnet mask helps the computer identify network and host address. How does it do that? Let us convert the given IP address and subnet mask into binary. This is the IP block given to us. If you look at the zeros in the subnet mask right here, we know that we can use only these bits. Keep in mind, when we get an IP address like this, we cannot make any changes here in these ones. Okay. So if you want to make, you can make more subnetworks, but these are the only bits that you have where you can make changes. We know that an IPv4 address is 32 bits long. Each of these ones and zeros, they represent a bit here in this subnet mask. If we count the ones here, these are in total 24. Okay. So while telling anyone about IP address, I can either say that the IP address is 192.168.1.2 with the subnet mask of 255.255.255.0, or alternatively, I can also say that the IP address is 192.168.1.2/24. Now the slash here, /24, it indicates the number of ones that we have in this subnet mask. This is called the CIDR notation, or classless interdomain routing notation. Now this makes it easier to convey the subnet mask. While keeping this in mind, let us go back to our example of IP address and have a look at the IP address and subnet mask once again. As we know that this is the class C IPv4 address. In this IP address, I have the option to use the 8 bits in the last octet. All right. The rest of the bits where you see ones, these are fixed and cannot be changed unless you get another IPv4 class IP address. We will have a look at this in some time. Now, we know that we have only these bits that we can use. Okay. So now let us see how we can use these to create different networks and hosts. Now, if you take the default and want to have just one network, right, the default one, then the total hosts you can have is 256 and the subnet mask will be /24. Okay. If you want to make two equal sized networks, each of these networks will have 128 hosts and the CIDR notation will be 25. Now here, if you see one, so we already had 24, now it is 25. Now this 25, it's because we have borrowed one bit from the available bit that we had. Keep in mind that we call the additional one bit as a borrowed because it was not part of the original IP address block that we got. Note that as we start making more networks, the number of hosts in every network keep decreasing, and with each increase, the subnet mask continues to increase by 1. You can also see that if you multiply the network in each section with the number of hosts, it will always be 256. For example, if you multiply this 256 with 1, the result will be 256. If you multiply 128 with 2, the result will still be 256. All right. So technically, the number of IP addresses, these are fixed. This is because this is the class C IPv4 address, and the total number of IPs available are 256. Another important point to note is that generally in any network, you would need to have first IP address reserved as network, and the last IP is reserved for broadcast. However, there may be specific situations where you can have just two IP addresses for hosts and none for the network and broadcast. We will not discuss this here, but just keep this in mind. In a normal situation, though, you will need to have IP addresses for network and broadcast. Now that we know how to find our networks and hosts in a class C IPv4 address, let us have a look at the process of how to find out the same information in a class B IPv4 address. Let us take an IP address of 172.30.0.0 with a subnet mask of 255.255.0.0. Let me put the subnet mask in binary. If we count these ones, we can see that these are 16 in total. If you use all the IPs in one network, you can have 65,536 hosts. And if you make two networks, each network will have 32,768 hosts. And every time the subnet mask will increase by 1, as we saw in the previous example. You can see it here in the table, the number of networks and hosts. There is something I wanted to show you here. Let us assume that you want to make 4 networks. This means that every network will have 16,384 hosts. Let us try and understand how the IP addressing will be done. Now we have the IP address 172.30.0.0 with the subnet mask of 255.255.0.0. Let us look at the subnet mask in binary here. Let me also put place values for each of these. Okay, let me again reiterate that the 2 octets, these two, they are separate, and this is why we had to put the place values separately for each. As we saw, if you want to make just 4 networks, each of these networks will have 16,384 hosts, and the CIDR notation for this is 18, which means that we received a 6/16 network, and we need to borrow 2 bits for making networks. As you can see that the place value for the last bit to the right is 64 right here. This simply means that each of these networks will be in the block of 64. That is, the first network will be from 172.30.0.0 to 172.30.63.255. Okay, because this is a block of 64 because of this. All right. Now the second network will be from 172.30.64.0 to the 172.30.127.255. Third network will be from 172.30.128.0 to 172.30.191.255. And the fourth network will be from 172.30.192.0 to 172.30.255.255. Now that we know we can how we can create networks, let us have a look at the IP address range that we will be able to use for the first network. We'll just take this network and we'll see how it works. All right. The first network that we have ranges from 172.30.0.0 to 172.30.63.255. Okay, that's a block. So we saw that there's a block of 64, and that's why this is the IP range. Before we begin, keep in mind that each octet, the starting number is 0 and the last number is 255. The IP addresses, they start with 172.30.0.0 and goes up to 172.30.0.255 right here. Remember now 255, these two blocks are blocked 172.30. The only changes can happen here. And now since we have 255, this is the highest number. And this is the highest number that we can get in an octet. So now we need to go back to the previous one and change this 0 to 1. So The second IP range of IP addresses will be from 172.30.1.0. So instead of 0.0, it's 1.0 now, and it goes up to 172.30.1.255. Now keep in mind, see, this is increasing by 1. Remember that we are going to make networks in the block of 64. We started with 172.30.30. 0.0 and I am, we can go on, but I'm not going to write all the IP ranges here. But if we continue increasing the number in the third octet by 1 until we reach 63, the last IP address we will have is 172.30.63.255. Remember that the 255 is the last number in a byte. Let us check how manually how many IP addresses these are in total. Now we started with 172.30.0.0 as the first IP address and ended with 172.30.63.255. This makes it 64 groups, and each group has 256 addresses ranging from 0 up to 255. So we started from 0, and if you look at it, we ended with 255. So including 0, it is 256. Now let's multiply these two numbers, 64, that's the group, and 256. We get 16,384. And this is exactly the number given in the table explaining how many hosts there will be in a class B IPv4 IP address if we create 4 networks. Alright, this brings us to the end of our lesson for today. We learned how we can create networks if we have a class B IP address. The same principle applies if we have a class A IPv4 address. First, we need to look at the place values for each of these numbers, decide how many networks and or hosts we need. Based on this information, we need to create networks and hosts. Keep in mind that each byte or octet here can give you a maximum of 256 IP addresses starting from 0 and going up to 255. Practice is the key. So take another IP address and create probably 8 networks this time. Refer to this table here to make things easy for you. At Accelerate, we work with students and startup companies in Canada by providing them with high performance and low cost computing devices to help them learn and grow. These Dell laptops start at just $400. If you would like to know how you can save on your next laptop purchase, do send us an email to the address which is flashing on your screen. Thank you so much for learning with me today. I will see you in the next video with another topic. Until then, a very happy learning.